Do you think you got what it takes to build your own dream team?
And Owens with a move. And a foot race. Chad Owens inside the 23. Bombers won't catch him. And it's a touchdown.
We'll log in and play with the big boys.
Deep drop for Bo Mitchell. And a deep toss now. Downfield. And it is caught. In stride. Bo Price is going to take it to the house.
Partnered with Fantasy.ca, Rouge Radio presents the CFL Fantasy Podcast.
Has time. Looking for Ernest Jackson. And one back down at the 5.
And now your CFL Fantasy Insiders, Dave Dawson and Rob Dalton.
The new Rouge Radio Fantasy Football Podcast, Episode 4, Fantasy.ca. You can follow us on Twitter at CFL Fantasy RR, also at Rouge Radio. Dalton and Dave heading into already nearing the halfway point of the CFL season. And if you are like Dalton and I in our leagues, the playoff season begins at week 15's already halfway through. We're not going to tell you where Daltz is, but I'm sitting in first. But again, as Daltz's popular joke with me, how many championships have I won?
Exactly. It's like, well, there's nothing I could say about that.
Yeah, it speaks for itself. But hey, the advice does speak for itself. We've got a lot of new followers. Thank you very much to you if you've been following us and picking our brains for advice. We've had a couple comments here and there about people saying, hey, those reports are on guys who are healthy and guys who are injured are hard to find. But the good news is, we're usually on top of that, so feel free to pick our brains. Daltz, you ready to go? We're going to fire through guys that are out this week and also some guys to add. You ready to roll?
I'm ready. Let's go.
First things first, actually, Daltz and I need to get a bit of a shout-out to Ottawa Red Blacks interior defensive tackle Keith Shulgin. Now, those of you... Go ahead.
Yeah, this guy apparently is one of the few that listens to our show because he heard the term Keith Shulgin syndrome, or I'm not too sure if we actually patented that, but you told him, hey, this is not a guy that to grab him off the waiver wire based on 1 week's performances, because he just went out and kind of destroyed the opposition last week.
Yeah, 3 sacks last week for Shulgin, a sack the week before. So Keith Shulgin syndrome, we dubbed that. Guys that you don't want to panic over. So, Keith, thanks for listening. We know you're listening. And we, because of your performance, have changed the name of the segment, which we'll get to a little later on in the show. So, shout out to Keith Shulgin right off the top of the show. All right, guys that are out this week, and it's been a busy one. There's been a lot of injuries. Obviously, unless you're hiding under a rock, Paris Cotton has a newly formed arm. He'll be out for the entire year from what it sounds like. Jarrell Scott will be jumping into the Bombers lineup. Cam Marshall will be getting the starting reps, but Jarrell Scott will look like he'll assume Cam Marshall's role. Darvin Adams looks like he'll be gone long-term for the Bombers. Nick Moore will be in the lineup this weekend, but again, Nick Moore in the lineup, it's usually in and out every week. Drew Willie, he's going to be gone 6 to 8 weeks, so basically don't pick up any Bomber quarterback. Great advice there. Kevin Elliott, still not sure how long, if he may be back in action for the Argos this weekend. Nothing totally confirmed yet. Darius Bowman is out for the Eskimos. Darrell Walker will be taking his spot, but Bowman only looks like he'll be missing for 1 week. Some interesting news in the Alouettes camp. Looks like defensive end John Bowman and Gerald Brown are in the doghouse. They might not play this weekend. Bowman leads the team, tied for the CFL lead in sacks, and he may be out of action this weekend. Dom Ellis and Aaron Lavarius might jump in their spot, and the word on that is just because of their age that they might be going a little bit younger. Chris Williams, still not determined if he'll play or not this weekend for the Red Blacks. Marcus Henry is taking first-team reps. He's back off the 6th game. He will be playing, and that's pretty much all we have for there. What about guys that are in the lineup and guys that you want to add, Daltz?
The guys that you kind of want to add that are in the lineup, and honestly, you might have dropped them because the CFL.ca or the scouting reports would indicate that Corey Greenwood is injured. I would be hesitant to drop him if you didn't. If you have and you're able to add him, I would re-add Corey Greenwood because that might not be the most reliable information.
Absolutely. Also, keep in mind that Jermaine Gabriel is going to be back in the lineup this weekend as well. Tyrell Sutton looks like he is back. Matt Black back as well and playing. So I think Brandon Rutley and Tyrell Sutton will be splitting the reps for Montreal from what it sounds like. Rest of the guys to add, Dolls.
DeAndre Spencer out of Toronto, Donald Washington out of Hamilton, Wallace Miles, Kenny Stafford out of Edmonton, Chris Getzlaff, well, maybe not Chris Getzlaff. Well, he might take a couple to the end zone with half of them being called back. Brett Smith, Bakari Grant, Mark LeGray, and Keenan McDougall. He's coming back from injury, as well as J.C. Sherritt and Tristan Okpalogo.
Yeah, I think nice bounce back year, or a slow start for Okpalogo, and now that he's starting to turn it around, J.C. Sherritt, nice bounce back year for him. Looks like he's really starting to return to the form that had him lead the CFL in tackles a couple of years ago. Keenan McDougall, as Daltz mentioned, and Mark LeGray, both back from injury. Guys to avoid, Daltz, I think number one on the list, there was pretty high expectations put on this guy in Ottawa Red Blacks camp, expecting a big year out of him, but he just cannot hold on to the ball. Yeah,
I guess there's the stigma of coming in as the self-proclaimed number one receiver when he was the first receiver that Marcel Desjardins went out and got, and he has just pretty much been kind of off the radar. I mean, it's not that he's injured, it's not that he's playing poorly. He's just not meeting the standards that they were expected to.
And by that guy, we mean Mo Price of the Ottawa Red Blacks. So he's going to be a guy that you want to avoid, especially with Marcus Henry coming off the 6th game into the lineup. Mo Price is a guy that I think the price is going to be wrong on him. So if you got him, I would avoid him at any cost. And also, because of the new developments this weekend, there's a couple of guys in blue and gold that I don't think you want to have on your roster.
Yeah, we're talking about, and unless your name is Clarence Denmark, and if you're deep at receiver and you have Rory Cohort, keep an eye on that. But if you have managed to get Julian Fioli-Gadino, drop him. Nick Moore, he's just not healthy, drop him. Justin Feltung, yes, but he's probably only successful in the deep ball. He's probably going to be returning. And as we've said so far this year, if you're a primary returner, and Troy Studemars probably hasn't got the job done, so he may be replaced. Justin Feltung, I like him with Drew Willie, without Drew Willie, probably not a good option.
Yeah, basically a short synopsis. The Bombers have no quarterback. So if you have a Lou Bomber receiver, I'd probably want to avoid them. Guys to avoid as well. Yes, Siobhan Walker had a big game last weekend, but I think any Ottawa running back, they just don't run the ball.
Yeah, it's really tough to say as to what's going on. You love to get the guy because on yards per carry, Siobhan Walker is probably top of the line as far as running backs go. But, yeah, they just don't I don't know what to say. They just do not want to run the ball out there in Ottawa. Whether it's Mike Gibson or Jason Moss, they just don't like it.
They don't like to run the ball. We'll fire through the last few here. Josh Johnson in BC looks like he's not hitting the numbers that we would have expected him this year. Guy I probably want to avoid. I could write a book on Terrell Sinkfield and all the questions I've taken on him over the past week and his expectations. I think Junior Collins, his play probably took Terrell Sinkfield's job. Don't expect Terrell Sinkfield to be in the lineup anytime soon. If he does, he's going to drive you fits. And if you didn't follow on our Twitter page, he's a lot like T.Y. Hilton in the NFL. You want to hug him or you want to punch him in the face. And I think Terrell Sinkfield, when it comes to fantasy points, along the same ways. And Daltz, I know this last one you'll love to sound off on in 10 seconds or less. A guy in Toronto who, again, just can't seem to bite the injury bug.
It's unfortunate because per fantasy points is probably every year will lead you and will give you some points, give you some wins in your fantasy head-to-head meetings. But it's a guy that, of course, you said just cannot stay healthy. Chad Owens out of Toronto, and he is just a multi-purpose receiver out of the backfield. He's always a go-to guy, especially when Ricky Ray was healthy. It's aside from Brandon Whitaker and Kevin Elliott and Torrey Gurley, he was Trevor Harris's go-to guy, and he's anybody's go-to guy is Chad Owens, but unfortunately, he's one of those random guys that just can't stay healthy. Avoid him. But if you can find a trading partner in your fantasy league, might want to take advantage of a guy on who may or may not pay attention to the injured reserve.
Absolutely, or pay attention to the draft period. Anybody drafting Chad Owens clearly hasn't done their research. Lots of potential, lots of skill, just can't stay healthy. Deontay Spencer played in his spot last week, got himself a touchdown. He's a guy that I would be grabbing onto right now, Deontay Spencer, but avoiding Chad Owens. That brings us to the former Keith Sholigan syndrome segment, now labeled PMS, aka panic mode syndrome. All right. I think we just covered it already, so we won't go too much on it, but adding Siobhan Walker, I don't think that you're going to want to run to the waiver wire or run and trade for Siobhan Walker. Yeah, he had one good game. That's his first good game in a Red Blacks uniform in a year. They don't use the running game. They don't use Siobhan Walker. They use him on kick returns. A guy with injury problems, and they use him on kick returns. I'm not really sure what they're doing out there in Ottawa, but I would not be running to add Siobhan Walker. Don't run and drop Jerome Messam. I've had some questions about that just because Stephen Miller saw just as many touches as Messam did last week, and Chaplin doesn't like to run the ball. Don't drop Jerome Messam. Not a smart move. Dropping Kendall Lawrence, definitely don't do that. Since Darius Bowman is out this week, the slot back position, Kendall Lawrence will see some more reps. Keep him in your lineup. And Daltz, one guy that I know that you're going to love to talk about, a guy who used to wear the blue and gold last year in Hamilton, and then dropped, and then released, and then signed him, and then released, and then signed him. Why should you not add Nick Grigsby?
Well, Ken Austin's offense in Hamilton is pass first, pass second. It's like a broken record that Hamilton does not like to run the ball, but they're open about it because of the amount of receiving depth that they have on that team. Terrell Sinkfield, as far as why you should drop him. The issue with Nick Grigsby is that he's not good after first contact. You give him the ball, yeah, he might give you maybe a 10-yard scamper here and there, but it's not going to be consistent, and the guy can't catch it out of the backfield.
Lots of speed. Nick Grigsby, he can break tackles, can catch to the backfield, and doesn't block well. That's the book on him. But hey, you hope for the best, but I would wait. Not run and add Nick Grigsby right now. And adding Greg Ellingson, I think last week, he had a big performance because Khalil Payton got injured, and Ellingson is basically one of the only main targets for Burris. So I think Ellingson is good, but with Henry back in the lineup, if Chris Williams is playing, I think Greg Ellingson is a guy that he won't get you explosive yards, especially with Ernest Jackson still in the lineup. He'll be a fourth or fifth option for Henry Burris. All right, sleepers, guys you can wait patiently on. I think Kamar Jordan of the Calgary Stampeders, once he finds his way back into the lineup, he'll be a big impact guy. He won't be coming right away, but I think if Jeff Fuller gets another injury and Jordan finds a way into the lineup, he's the guy that you want to jump on. And James Rogers of the Alouettes, Daltz is a guy that showed some promise late in the season last year. He should be coming off the 6th game pretty soon. And what do you like about the way James Rogers plays?
He's versatile because he catches out of the backfield, at least last year when the Alouettes weren't deep at receiving help. And he's also a very versatile returner. So he's like the Brandon Banks almost as far as getting you some points off punt returns.
This could be the quickest we've ever fired through a number of those lists ever in CFL Fantasy Rouge Radio history. I think we should give ourselves a round of applause there, Daltz. Bit of a pat on the back. It's a pretty good run for it. And Darrell Scott is another one, running back for the Bombers with Cam Marshall in there. Former NFL prospect as well. Darrell Scott, I think once he gets a couple of carries, he could wow the Bombers. And of course, Bombers will be doing a lot of running the ball because their passing attack looks like Rob Marv will finally get the green light for the Bombers. We'll wait and see what he can do. All right, got a few questions to fire through here. First one, we will get to Joe Pritchard. It should be a fairly easy one. He asked us, after fixing his quarterbacks, he has BC quarterbacks, Harris, Arsenal, Colley, and BC kickers. Is there too much reliance on BC? I said very likely yes. Austin Colley is maybe a guy that I would be a little cautious with going forward. I think that Courtney Taylor, AC Leonard, and Arsenault could be the primary targets there, but I don't think that's too hard of a question, but I think for the most part, and I had another question as well. I don't remember who sent it, actually. I lost that tweet, but either Tyrell Sutton or Brandon Rutley this weekend. Definitely go with Tyrell Sutton. He's going to be your option. And Daltz, there's one last question we got here from Brad Stewart at Donkey Kong 5K. Love the Twitter handle, Mr. Brad Stewart. Solid name. All right, we got so some secondary options here, Daltz. He sent us a screen cap of some of the free agents on the list, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll highlight some of the ones that are sticking out. Jermaine Gabriel, Matt Black, both back from the injury reserve. Brandon McDonald in Ottawa, DeMond Washington in the Bombers, Owusu Ansa in Toronto, and Craig Butler in Hamilton. I believe Butler should be back from the injury reserve, but which one is out of those guys would you earmark as potentially being a good target to pick up off the wire?
I really like DeMond Washington. I know he's been our whipping boy, but here's the thing. This week, with Toronto, the fact that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense are going to be on the field for a long period of time, he's probably a good option to get you some tackles because he gets beat enough, and he's going to get beat a lot this coming weekend. I also like Ansel out of Toronto. I think he was the one with the pick six against Brett Smith. He's going to have his eyes like Krispy Kreme glazed donuts out of Krispy Kreme because he's going to see a lot of pick six opportunities, whether it's from Robert Marv, whether it's from Dominic Davis, or whoever's playing. Most likely, if Brian Braum gets in there, everybody's going to get a pick six. So if you have an opportunity to pick someone from Toronto's defense, that's a guy that I would definitely look to pick. Pretty much anybody on the defensive side of Toronto this week is a guy that's most likely to be picked. Those are my guys right off the bat.
Perfect. Jermaine Gabriel or Owusu Ansah. Either one of hopefully that answers your question. And hopefully that answers all of your questions on this show so far. Dolph, that might be a record. Our fastest fantasy football show ever.
Yeah. I mean, I've been kind of I've just been getting better and as far as health wise. So I think that's pretty much the reason. Don't want to hesitate with the answers. Get right through them and looking forward for a good weekend of football, especially with tomorrow's podcast.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be a good one tomorrow. Make sure to tune in. We have Darren Bombing from TSN 1290 in Winnipeg on to talk about how sore your willy is. We'll be happy to get in depth with that. And Tony's pissed off about something. You don't want to miss that. Follow Daltz at Rouge Daltz on Twitter, myself at Dave Dawson7. Follow us at Rouge Radio or at CFL Fantasy RR. Thanks for listening. Enjoy your weekend of football and play fantasy safely.